We will begin with our roll call. Aniskevich.
Happy New Year to everyone here.
Gippin.
Here.
Mr. Peoples will be absent. Hawkins.
Here.
Castle.
Here.
Costa.
Present.
Richards.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Boyd is here. I'll make a motion for the approval of last meeting's minutes. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, that passes. Next, we'll be the reading of our CPOB values and purpose. The overarching mission of the Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board is to foster conditions and police practices that ensure the safety of all residents of the city of Akron. The CPOB is empowered by a new charter provision to independently direct the police auditor, whose office reviews investigations into complaints and misconduct involving officers. The board and the auditor also review every standard investigation, whether by the Akron Police Department or outside agencies, into the use of deadly force by an officer. Our values are as follows. Our decisions and actions are motivated by our love for Akron and our desire for all to feel safe in the community. We value unity of voice and action. We respect each other and those we serve. We seek to build relationships of trust, and we seek to always conduct ourselves with integrity. We listen to understand, learn, and lead. We strive to be inclusive of all stakeholders' voices. We value change at a system level. We hold ourselves accountable for our actions and deeds, and we hold our partners and those we serve to be accountable to their actions and deeds as well. At this time, I'll move on to item number 5 on our agenda, which is public comment, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Aniskevich.
Yes, this is our public comment period. We have one person who would like to speak, Mr. Bill Reynolds. You'll get 5 minutes, so if you need more, that's fine. We understand the magnitude of everything that's going on and the report that came out today, so feel free.
Thank you. And I wrote this before the report came out today, and I'm quite disturbed by the report, just as a side note. Individuals are innocent until proven guilty, and police officers are no different. But if I was in the same situation, I'd be detained, booked, and most likely held in jail until a judge granted my bond. The police instead are given a long played-out investigation and a paid vacation. I think that the contract should read that pay is withheld from officers until the investigation is through. Make these officers suffer an economic hardship like anybody else. Many of us would lose our job just for being arrested, and then we'd have to fight to get it back once vindicated. We would also have the dropped charges follow us for years, and today's background checks just look at charges on court dockets. If and only if the officer is vindicated, the officer should be given back pay. Also, where was justice for Jalen Walker and Jasmine Tucker and countless others, victims innocent until proven guilty? They were shot before they even made it to handcuffs, let alone a courthouse and a judge or jury. The ongoing injustices to black men is injustices to all. It is a fact of human rights. We give these police officers authority, but that comes with a high level of responsibility. This responsibility is clearly being flouted in APD. Did Officer Devin Fields start his day planning to kill Jasmine Tucker? I don't know. But if he didn't, he made a huge, deadly mistake. We talk of accountability. If I made a huge, deadly mistake, I would most likely lose everything, up to and possibly including my life. The fact that an APD officer has a modified wartime rifle in his squad is only proof of some police militarization. I am calling on Akron to continually be involved in conversation of best practices. We can study all we want, but it's just a waste of time and money without actual intent to use behind it. As far as this use of force review, I have issues with the cost of this review. In a day when technology is basically king, I utilized ChatGPT. My request was write a best practices police use of force policy. Tonight, I will give you a copy of that, of what was produced. I want to highlight two spots. Minimal force. Officers should use the least amount of force necessary to safely manage a situation. The use of deadly force is only justified when the officer or another person is facing an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. An imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, or when the use of such force is necessary to prevent a serious crime. Secondly, the conclusion of what I have, which should be the guiding light of any quality police department. It is the policy of this police department to prioritize de-escalation and the preservation of life in all encounters. Officers must always be mindful of the serious responsibility entrusted to them in the use of force and are expected to exercise judgment and restraint in all situations. Grabbing a military-grade AR rifle instead of a handgun for a basic shots fired situation shows both a lack of judgment and restraint. If a robot can come up with these best practices for use of force, why haven't we here in Akron? In the facts for these two firms, it speaks of the cost of a consent decree. In my opinion, a consent decree has teeth behind it. There are changes that you must make whether or not you want to. These changes are most likely always in the interest of the citizens and the police that serve them. Rep. John Lewis said, if you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something about it. Thank you, Akron police officers that respond to our calls for help and act appropriately. In other words, thanks to the good officers. Thank you for your time, and I hope that as we go forward, you can use this in your work.
Keisha, could you get that? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Is there anyone else who did not have the opportunity to fill out a comment form who would like to speak? Please take the podium.
Hi, I did not prepare a speech. I just want to say that this is a reflection on all of you, is just as much as it is the APD, because you guys are supposed to help. And so when I first walked in here, the first thing I saw was people laughing and chit-chatting. It's really not a funny situation. It's a family in here grieving right now. It's people who are a part of the community out here grieving. So we want every last situation, every last second of a situation to be treated as if it was you or your family. So first off, when I walk in here and people laughing and smiling, it's not nothing funny about what's going on. At the end of the day, his report of how many instances he had where he did not follow protocol or follow orders, there was no reason for him to still be in the field. Also, there was no reason for him to be able to use a military assault rifle. Y'all have tasers, y'all have mace, they tear gassed us last year. Where are these things being used in a situation like this? Because if someone was to walk in my home right now and rob me and leave my house and I chased after them and they were not posing no type of threat, I will go to jail. I will have to prove in the court of law that that person was a danger to me and anybody else around me. So when y'all let police officers who are supposed to protect and serve us, which I have not seen that on a police car in I don't know how many years. So when y'all have people who are supposed to protect and serve us, and then they gun a 15-year-old child down, and y'all say, oh, we're going to send them on paid leave, we're going to send them on paid vacation, that is a clear message to us. If we can't call on y'all to help the police who's supposed to protect us, and then we keep coming to these pointless meetings because nothing's being done. The same mayor who we got elected is not doing anything for us because he's scared. What message are y'all sending to us? Because there's no way with a rap sheet that long, if a person with that type of rap sheet can't even go and get a job at the grocery store, how did a person like that get to still be on our streets, patrolling our streets? There is no excuse. There is no excuse for him to keep being repositioned and resent to different places. He's a danger to society. And when it's a danger to society, y'all lock them up. Innocent until proven guilty. They didn't see a gun. They didn't see anything. They shot that boy with no proof and just got lucky that he just so happened to have a firearm on him. But nobody asked why a 15-year-old child would feel like he needs to walk around with a firearm. Y'all asking the wrong questions. He's 15 with no record, who was spoken highly of. At what point do anybody sit and say, you know what? Why would a child with such a bright future, with such a bright past, feel threatened to have to walk around with a firearm? We're not asking the right questions here. Because anytime anything happens and we got to go up against the biggest gang, the APD, all logical questions get thrown out the window. It's, where was his parents at that night? Where was his family at that night, waiting on him to get home? So y'all asking the wrong questions. And y'all letting predators who treat our life and our kids like a game of Call of Duty to be on the streets is sending a clear message. And for him to be on paid vacation is an even more clear message, because like my friend said here, if I committed a crime, I would be in jail right now waiting for trial. If y'all want to get real justice, at least let us make it to trial. We never make it to trial. There was an instance 2 years ago where a white man shot his neighbor and was out on bond the same day. Where is that? Where is that for us? If we such criminals and we not law-abiding citizens, let us make it to court to face our judgment. But we never get that opportunity. And then y'all say, oh, we feel for the family. We sending our support. We're sending our love. But y'all got a serial killer at this point on paid leave. Y'all protecting him, protecting his house, protecting his job. What about Jasmir's family? What about what they got to go through? So when I come in this courtroom and the first thing I see is people laughing and chatting, and this is not a game. Y'all don't know what we are out here doing. We are out here battling every single day with ignorant people in comments, with ignorant police officers. The last time we came here, the whole gang of them had their shirts on and they was laughing at the family. Nobody put that on the news. They didn't put that on the news. Y'all didn't address that. Y'all addressing everything that's not relevant in this situation because y'all trying to put on the front and push a narrative. And I promise you this, we will not let that narrative be pressed on that young black man, period. And like I said, at the end of the day, y'all cannot say, because at the end of the day, when that man clocks out, he's a normal citizen. Treat him as such. And if he was a police officer, then he should have been held to the highest consequence. He should have been held to the highest consequence. But to protect that man and to give him paid leave and to keep repositioning him after his track record, but if it had been anyone else on a regular civilian, couldn't even get a job. So I'll leave y'all with that. No matter what y'all want to say or no matter how y'all try to justify it, that boy, y'all saw no gun, y'all didn't see anything, y'all did not provide first aid, and we just sat here and did this with Jalen Walker, and our tax dollars got paid to handle that settlement. Why should the community have to keep paying for y'all mistakes? Thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
Excuse me.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay. I just want to say thank you, the two of you, for your public comments. And what you're saying is being heard. But I do want to say this on behalf of myself and this entire board. No one sitting in this room condones what happened. No one. No one condones what has happened. No one in this room is defending anyone for anything that they have done. And I just want to make that clear, especially this board.
Thank you, Ms. Anaskevich, and thank you for all the public comments that have went forth. Mr. Gippen,
Yes. Mr. Chairman?
did you have a motion that you wanted to make?
Oh, well, yes. It's our first meeting of the year, and I think our officers' terms expire, so that it's appropriate to elect our officers for the coming year. And in light of that, I nominate you to serve another term as chair.
I'd like to second that nomination.
Any discussion? We'll roll call vote. Ms. Anaskevich?
Yes,
Gippen?
Yes?
Hawkins?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Likewise, I would move that Ms. Anaskevich serve another term as vice chair.
I'll second that. Roll call vote. Mr. Gippen?
Yes?
Hawkins?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Motion passes. We'll move into item number 6 of our agenda, which is our committee report out. Mr. Fennell, who is here, our auditors, doesn't have a report out, so I'll move to governance. Mr. Gippen?
he's on,
Yeah, he's here, but he doesn't have a report out.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, in connection with review, I was at the meeting last week, and I mentioned this to Mr. Fennell in the meeting. And I would, at least as one member, I would like to resume seeing the completed use of force reports that we were seeing before Mr. Fennell came, and understanding what's being done now is coming off of Blue Team, in which we may or may not be able to see. But if there's some way that we can get what we were getting before, I, at least for one, would appreciate being able to see those. They give good insight as to what is going on in the department, even though we know most of the no issues taken with most of the reports. So I'd like to see that, and I hope it can be done. I noted that when you were reading our creed, that part of what we see ourselves doing is reviewing all those uses of force. So I'd like to resume doing that, and I hope that Mr. Fennell can find a way to get those, again, just what the public would get, to get those into our hands.
Mr. Fennell, do you have any comment regarding that?
Yes, yes, thank you. And to the community and the board members, forgive my absence. I'm down with the flu, but I joined you via Zoom. As Mr. Gippen stated, he made that request with me, and I've reached out to the law department to get clarity on what exactly I can share, since we now get that information directly from Blue Team. I just want to make sure that I'm not sharing information that I should not. Those reports are not generated by our office. So once I get a response and clarity back from the law department, I'll figure out a way to share that information based on that advice.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Mr. Gippen, did you have anything else regarding governance?
Well, just in general, we had mostly what we spent the time on at the meeting was the upcoming forum, and again, continuing the discussion that we've been having for these weeks and months about use of force. I shared some drafts, or not drafts, but documents from other use of force policies. A good discussion. We'll continue that again, following the schedule that we adopted last month. Presume the two committees will meet the Wednesday before our next meeting, and I assume governance will continue those discussions.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Gippen from our board? Thank you, Mr. Gippen. Next, we'll move on to community engagement. Ms. Jones, do you have anything you would like to bring forth?
Well, I think as most of you know, we, in collaboration with Councilman Garrett, we held a use of force public community meeting last week, January 9th. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend. I was out of town. I understand that Board Member Hawkins Burney was present. She might have some comments. I know Mr. Gippen was there as well, and then Keisha Myers has some notes, and I just wanted her to share a little summary of what the meeting was about.
Absolutely. Did you all want to make comments before I kind of summarize what took place? No? Okay. So, yes, the community forum held on January 9th at Ed Davis Community Center in collaboration with at-large Councilman Eric Garrett. It was well attended. It was standing room only, so the community really came to lend their voice and their support for the forum. There were several kind of takeaways, if you will, from the forum. There's no real glamorous way to present the use of force, the current APD use of force policy. So we just kind of presented it as it states, as it's stated. One thing to note is just the objectively reasonable, that's kind of littered throughout the policy. We talked a little bit about that in the Graham Standard. Mr. Gippen gave a kind of a summary of what that means. There's a lot of talk of, if a police officer feels they're an immediate threat, what is within policy for them to act and do in terms of lethal force and non-lethal force. So what came out of it were several comments. So starting with kind of what was noticed, the community, there was a lot of passion expressed by various community members, people wanting, action to be taken. Community members feel like the elephant in the room is kind of the Fraternal Order of Police. And there's a call for officers to stop harming individuals and getting away without any consequences. There was also a call for the end of qualified immunity. In addition to that, what was expressed that is needed, particularly by this board, is for independent legal counsel, for really individuals to kind of vote their interests politically, to build a community where police are no longer needed. That was discussed. In addition to that, some unanswered questions were: how are potentially violent officers getting hired? How did Tim Barfield, who made racist statements, get a contract? Who gets disciplined or fired? How does the process take place? Why do we give the least educated personnel in criminal justice / police officers the power to take a life? And who is holding Frank Williams accountable in FOP union negotiations? So again, there was and this is just a summary, but there was a lot more kind of robust conversation taking place. So there is another forum that will be held on the 22nd, which is next week at EAN to see the East Akron Neighborhood Development Center. That will be at 6 o'clock on that evening. So
I have a question, Ms. Jones, if I could ask. Do we have a system in place to where, for the unanswered questions, do we know where those questions need to go so we can get them answered for people? Because, again, we're inviting people out to these community engagements. They're asking questions, and I feel a certain amount as a board of responsibility to get these questions answered or to funnel them to who can answer them. Because if we can't, that's fine. But do we have something in place to attempt to get these questions answered so we can get it back, so at our next forum, we can come back and address these questions?
great question. Do we have a formalized system? I would say no, but I think it would be kind of prudent of us to do our due diligence to try to get those questions answered as best we can. One thing that we've been discussing, Ms. Jones and I, of really having more focus groups and continuing the conversation in more circles, if you will, talking circles where we can really engage with the community and, kind of roll up our sleeves and, extract more information, more data, will also provide the things that we can answer and actually answer them in a more intimate setting. It's kind of hard to have a structure where everybody kind of has a voice in their talking and then try to answer every single thing that's being said within that space. So we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. We don't quite have an answer yet, but we're thinking of, perhaps developing some partnerships with already established, organizations and having those kind of talking circles where we can really engage the community on an intimate level and, again, get those unanswered questions answered.
Okay.
I have a question.
Real quick, the question, what will the 700,000 plus contract produce, is that referring to the review?
Correct. Yeah, that was also asked as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I
Yeah.
say something real quick?
Yes.
Yes, we at the forum last week and the one next week, we will have community representatives that will assist with gathering and capturing everyone's thoughts and notes. And so today I just received the summation of the notes from last week's forum, and my intent is to take those questions that we're not able to provide answers to, and over the next readout, be able to provide an answer or a source for those questions, and then also to incorporate those questions into the discussions that we'll have going forward with the use of force review. So as we had the forum and people were stating their concerns, we had people gathering that information. So what could not be answered on the spot will definitely receive a response. And if we don't know exactly who the source of the question is, then we'll provide it. I'll provide it through the open forum of our board meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Ms. Anaskevich and then
Yeah,
Ms. Hawkins.
I have a question and then a comment. So for the questions that were answered, those are very prudent and very pertinent questions. And I think that they are questions that need to be answered. So my question was, anyone from the mayor's office or the Akron Police Department at this event?
Captain Miller was.
Yes, Captain Miller was
Okay.
there. Is there anyone from the mayor's office?
Some other police officers there.
Were there? Okay.
That was seasoned police officers.
Did they offer to try to answer some of those questions that were specific to them and their policies and how they are managing the citizenry in Akron? Did any of them offer to answer any of those questions that are clearly questions that are geared to the police department?
No.
Not at all, no.
Well, see, so now my comment then is, that's where all of this needs to start. We don't need to start kicking cans down the road and saying, well, we're going to bring these community people in, and we're going to bring these community people in. We need to start having those questions answered by the people who can answer them, which is the mayor's office and the Akron Police Department. And that's where it needs to start. And if it doesn't start there, then we're just kicking the can down the road as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Ms. Anaskevich. Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, I was just going to mention that one of the things also that was mentioned was that when officers go through the training academy, they usually go to night shift, the least desired shift. And they were asking, why would we put the least, the least trained officers on night shift when a lot of situations also happen. And I also was kind of looking, I thought that the reason that some police officers as well as the FOP, I thought they were there to kind of help out, kind of answer some questions too. So but, they didn't. And so that was another question that the community has. Is it possible that, that they can have more trained and more seasoned officers at nighttime when more serious, maybe crimes occur, so that they can have, more trained and just more experience. And people also asked a lot about the, I guess, the background checks, as well as, more of the military and what counts to, get them cleared to become a police officer. So those are some questions that the community had as well. And I think that, that we need to figure out how to answer them in our community meetings, and at least have the support there that will support the policies and the procedures with the city, so they understand that we aren't just not doing anything.
Yeah.
So I think there's,
Mr. Costa.
I think there's a tension between the understanding of what we're doing and what we're actually empowered to do. The reminder is, again, this board is empowered to make recommendations to city council and to the mayor's office. We made recommendations going into the collective bargaining negotiations that there be some thought to revising the way that the shifts are handled. And so, and a number of these questions that are coming are really philosophic in nature, that go to the core issues of policing kind of and what is done in general. So while I think we can attempt to get some answers to folks in the community, at the end of the day, our ability really is to gather the folks and the players in the city and to try to garner some answers on behalf of the folks and the citizens here in the city. And so, we can do our best job to address those questions from our perspectives, how we see it. But I want us to be careful in terms of what we represent to citizens with respect to some very, very tough questions that are being asked about our policing in our community.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And if I may, just to piggyback on Brandon, some of this is FOP related. For example, having all the rookies and the younger officers on the night shift. We all know that that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But a lot of times when they negotiate contracts, some of the older officers feel like they have put their time in and that they have earned the right to have the day shift or the afternoon shift and shouldn't have to work nights anymore. They did that when they were rookies. So some of that, we can't touch any of that. That has to do with the FOP. But I will say that having a lot more rookies on the night shift, the midnight shift, 'cause I used to work at the police department, having more rookies on the midnight shift and not a lot of seasoned officers, or the only seasoned officers are the high law, sergeant, lieutenant, captain. That's not necessarily a good idea either, because they are still in training. So they need a seasoned officer in the seat next to them to help train them. You can't have two newbies in one car together on the night shift training each other. So I think they need to create some incentives for some of the seasoned officers to work the night shift. Give them an extra pay or an extra week of vacation or something. But that's on the police department to come up with those ideas. But I tell you what, they need to start coming up with some ideas. They need to start coming up with some ideas, because this is getting out of hand.
Is our,
Mr. Chair.
yes, go ahead.
So I just wanted to speak to and have the board really think about the purpose of these community forums. So initially, when we first thought about having a forum in January, and this was before we collaborated with at-large Councilman Garrett, it was basically to, one, educate the community on what the policy is, and then two, in a structured kind of environment, get their ideas on how they think that policy should change, what modifications, what changes, what should be eliminated, what should be added, based on all the stuff that we see that's going on. Our goal had been to record in a kind of a systematic way the ideas generated from our community, the input that we're receiving, then to summarize that or to actually record that and have that in a written document, one, to submit to if we get this review, the review that the city council is supposed to be voting on, I guess, at some point or another to review the use of force policy, and also for us as a board to be able to say, this is what the community is saying. These are the specific ideas that are being generated by our community, and therefore this is what we recommend. Now, as has been pointed out, this board has recommendation power, and that's it. I mean, we don't have the power to make anything happen, but it is our job to, at least in my opinion, to hear from the community and make sure that we are representing with specificity and accuracy what the community is saying in terms of what should be done with our use of force policy. So it's kind of difficult. I wasn't at the meeting. I understand that there was a lot of passion, there was a lot of understandable rage, and so it's easier to ask the questions in a lot of ways. And if in fact there are questions that need to be answered by the FOP or the mayor's office or the police department, then they should be there. If we're going to hold a forum and ask people to come and give their time and express their opinion and their ideas, and then they have legitimate questions, then if we can't collaborate with the police department and with the mayor's office to have a full contingent of people there, so that we aren't kicking the can down the road and asking people to come and vent their rage and their frustration and their anger, understandable, and their pain, and then go home and nothing happens. And so I think that, and to me, this is a major work of this board at this point. The infrastructure of the board is in place. We got the auditor, we got the deputy auditor, we have all those things. And so now with the things that keep happening in our community, it should be all hands on deck as a board. I mean, in my opinion, and I wasn't there so I can't talk, but we should all be there. Tomorrow we're going to, is it tomorrow, Keisha?
It is tomorrow.
Tomorrow we're going to have a meeting so that we can kind of figure out, well, what this next one's going to look like. It sounds like a lot of what was said, and it wasn't just people that came from the west side, because there's people from the east side as well that were at this meeting. So what is this next meeting going to look like? What are all of our best ideas for how do we go forward, and how do we make it meaningful and something that's going to be impactful and useful going forward?
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on one second, Mr. Goodman. Ms. Jones, thank you so much for your comments, because my question was going to be, did we send two questions? Did we send out an invitation for someone to represent the mayor's office, to represent the police department, to represent the FOP, to come in and be a part of what we were doing that evening? That was my first question. The second question I want to ask is, you talked about what our purpose was as a board. My question becomes, and again, I'm going to look to you, Keisha, Mr. Gippen, and Ms. Hawkins. Did our voice or our purpose get lost in this forum? Mm-hmm. Like that becomes my question, because if our purpose, which I agree with you, our purpose and what's under our umbrella do is to help to educate the community and to collaborate with the stakeholders to bring about the resolutions that the community is looking for, at least to have discussions for that in a really meaningful and helpful way. But was the purpose that, and the intention that we had of doing this, was our voice as a board, was it lost? That's my question.
Mr. Chairman, and actually your question goes a bit to what I was going to say. I think we had the circumstance of timing where Councilman Garrett, put together these forums and has promoted them, and I think it was the correct thing for us to essentially come into his forums and not do the forum that we had contemplated. And actually, I think you and I spoke about this morning, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a little confusion. I saw a media story this morning still talking about a forum we were going to put on the 21st, which my understanding is we are no longer doing, and maybe that ought to be made clear that we're going to participate in Councilman Garrett's forum on the 22nd, not do one of our own. But that said, I think that we had a relatively minor part of that forum. I mean, Keisha was invited to speak, and I did, but it was Councilman Garrett's forum, And I think that for that reason, it did not, for the most part, carry out the purposes that we had talked about. And Ms. Holden in particular was there, and she was taking notes, and I think maybe that's the core of what we have here. But it was just a different kind of forum. And I don't think that there's any reason to think that the forum next week is going to be much different. So we ought to just have a good constructive role in that, as I think we did the other night. But then we need to go back to Plan A and think about what our forum or forums look like, where we're the ones who are deciding who should be invited, what the format will be, what the product will be that we want to take away out of it. So the answer to your question is yes, for the most part. I think that if we were looking for a community response as to whether there should or should not be a review of use of force, overwhelmingly, resoundingly, that the people in that meeting said absolutely yes. But beyond that, we didn't get what we were looking for. So we need to really plan, I think, for going into February maybe with our forum and forums.
I agree. I agree 100%.
I agree too.
Mr. Fennell, do you have any comments regarding that?
No, I completely agree. I do think it's worthwhile that we participate on the 22nd, but clearly our purpose and what we sought to get out of this community conversation really did not happen. My objective when I first thought of having these forums was to gather the community's voice with respect to the use of force policy and associated policies regarding APD's use of force, and bring that to the table when the city hires their consultants to do a top-to-bottom review of the use of force policies and practices for APD. And I wanted to make sure that while we had a seat at the table, we were representing the community's interests completely. And the only way to do that would be to hear from the community. My understanding is that many other issues and questions were raised at this last forum where there were no there are no answers that number one would satisfy the community at that point. I mean, you can give the honest answer of what the situation is, but having to solve or revise or restructure those processes would not occur in that environment. And so for me and for what I foresee us doing is having that seat at the table. Since I had my since I had my recommendations made on my reports to do the use of force review, I'm happy to see that those recommendations are being taken seriously by the city. So now I want to move into the second phase of gathering the community's input with the understanding that the consultants are going to try to do the same. And I want to make sure that we can bring that community voice to the table. So I know there are many, many questions about all aspects of the process for the way the city and the police department operates. But right now, I'm singularly focused on this use of force review. And I think getting that done is going to be the step the step in the right direction. I'm sorry for making some substantial changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. I would like to make a motion that as a board, we seek to have our own forum to where we invite stakeholders to be a part of that forum, and also invite our community to help to serve Ms. Jones and Ms. Castle when it comes to our community engagement. So I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second, with Mr. Chairman, may I assume that you meant plural forums conceivably, not just one forum?
Yes.
Can we have a discussion?
Can I ask
Yeah,
a
yeah,
question?
we're gonna, yeah, that's what it, once we get to motion now, we can discuss. Go ahead, Mr. Fennell.
Yes, when you say stakeholders, are you also talking like the FOP and members
Yes,
from APD?
yes.
Okay, because I see that as a different type of forum than the one that I just
No,
spoke
and
of.
that's fine, Mr. Fennell, but it's a forum
Okay,
nonetheless. And we're not just trying to have one isolated forum, but it may be a
okay,
series that we need to do of forums. I think to get back to the heart of what Ms. Jones was talking about as far as our responsibility, to address some of these things, but also to invite community members and citizens to help come in and listen at those committee meetings. Would you agree, Ms. Jones and Ms. Castle, that would be important?
Let's say that again. You're asking,
I'm asking as we look to plan and purpose a forum that is directed and that is channeled by this board, right? We want to be able to have, as far as we're gonna have our ideas, but we invite the community into our communities, to our committee space to listen and hear. I know they come to governments and they come to some of our other committees. I think inviting them into that space to hear some of those thoughts and ideas and begin that at the beginning process with us as we plan those things out are important, as well as our board.
yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. I also think that, you know, community engagement, you know, is a broad spectrum. It can be used for education, which we're talking about, to gather input, and it also can be used to build relationships of trust. And we clearly have a huge job before us to build relationships of trust between the community and law enforcement. We can be a us versus them situation from now on. There are many communities across the country who are using talking circles to try to, and the circles have both community and law enforcement, you know, sharing their stories so that we can come to understand each other, come to understand what it's like if you're a police officer and you know you're afraid, you know, and or what it's like as an African American or a male or female or black or brown person when you know that maybe the presumption there's a presumption of our guilt or dangerousness, you know, on behalf of law enforcement. So we've got to talk those things through. We've got to get to the point where we're working on the same team. And again, I've mentioned this before, and it may be pie in the sky, but it certainly is something that is worth working toward. And those kinds of forums are different. I won't even call them a forum. I call those, you know, community conversations, circles where we come together. Officers don't have to be there in uniform. You know, they have stories as to why they became an officer, what their goal is, what they need. We have the same thing. And so that ultimately one day, probably when I'm gone, but one day we might be on the same page with regard to how we make Akron a safe, beautiful place to live. And that's going to take all of us. And so this whole community engagement thing is huge. It spans a large spectrum from education and input to relationship building, building relationships of trust. And it's actually, when you said that, Chairman, this morning in our mission, I guess what it is, you said the exact words, relationships of trust. Yeah. And that's going to be the hardest thing because the trust has been broken, it has been breached in so many different ways, and it's going to take so much work to build it.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And I think under the umbrella of community engagement, I think you said it correctly, and as well as Mr. Fennell, it's going to be important for us to, if you will, tackle this from many different angles and to have a menu of how we do it. Some of these might be educational, as what Mr. Fennell was talking about. Others are going to be, how do we build relationships across these different sectors? And I think all that's going to be needed and from an ingredients perspective of how we, if you will, bake out this cake. So I think that was well said. Ms. Castle, I wanted to see if you had any further comments.
Yeah, I share a lot of the same sentiments that Ms. Jones just shared, but I also think one of the unique things about this board is that we have a different angle of outreach, so connecting with those citizens that maybe wouldn't be part of this process. So we are very grateful for the familiar faces that we see at the meetings, we see at the committees, and we want to thank them endlessly for their support and their participation in this process, but also finding ways to engage with people who may not have been part of the process, who have a voice, who have insight, and looking at how we can connect with them and invite them to these forums or these spaces so that we can make sure that we are getting different voices, that we are, as a board, we're representing the citizens of the city, and just making sure that we can look at how we can expand that reach and how we as a board strategically communicate things like the forum, how we do that, just very strategically so we can get a broader landscape as well when we get that feedback.
I agree.
Mr. Chairman, just a process question for Ms. Jones. Is it still your thought that matters concerning community engagement are going to be considered in governance for the most part? Or did you think we're at the point where we'd have separate meetings?
Well, I know I don't have any time for a separate meeting.
So-
And I'm still not the chair. I'm just, I know I want to make sure that we're continuing to include Erica. I know you had mentioned that you're still very much interested in, and then actually what's turning out to be is that Keisha, I think the office is kind of driving the community engagement piece in terms of all the logistics of it, and certainly we meet and we put our heads together in terms of what it's going to be like. I don't know, Mr. Gippen, in terms of how the meetings, right now we're doing some Zoom meetings through Teams, some planning meetings through Teams. Maybe that's probably what we'll end up doing for the most part going forward, trying to plan out these forums. And again, I think it should be as many voices and ideas. All of us are smarter than any of us. And so if we can all put our heads together to figure out how this thing will be, how these forums should go forward, the best.
Well, then I'm kind of taking away a yes, that if the public wants to be involved in a scheduled way.
I see what you're saying.
In discussions about community engagement, whether that's mostly going to be the forums, but that would be, as we've begun doing, and I maybe should have mentioned it, that's something which can be considered part of the governance agendas, so that for people in the community who want to be talking about that aspect of our work, that's going to be the place where we would be doing that, right?
Especially since we decided that we're going to be doing all of our meetings on one night anyway,
Yes.
the second Wednesday of the month, yes.
Right, good.
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins, before I leave this, do you have any comments
Oh,
regarding
no.
community engagement? Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't want to
Yeah.
forget about you.
I was just trying
I
to second the
apologize.
motion the last time I said something. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I
Appreciate
ask
it.
a quick question? So
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So we don't currently have a chair for community engagement for that committee, or we do?
We don't.
We don't?
Well, I'm sure, I don't know if you were present at the meeting where I had wanted to take it on, and then I feel that just because of some personal situations,
Okay.
that I don't want the responsibility of having to drive it and call the meetings and all of that. I certainly want to lend whatever expertise and time that I can to planning the sessions out, the forums out, the circles out, and do every and all things that I can to really drive our community engagement component forward. But we don't have an official chair.
Yeah, and what I was saying, the absence of having an official chair, I think it would probably fall back on the chair of the board, to where I would assume, if you will, that responsibility.
Good.
Yeah. Any other questions, Ms. Myers? Okay. All right, now we'll move on to Mr. Costa and Finance.
Well, what about your motion? You never got
Oh, yeah,
a
that's
second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we got to fight. Thank you so much, Ms. Anaskevich. We'll roll call vote. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Gibbon?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Thank you. We'll start some of those discussions of what that looks like as far as a menu of different options of our community engagement piece. And Ms. Myers, I look forward to sitting and talking with you, as well as Ms. Jones, Ms. Castle, and almost Ms. Hawkins.
So you want to table discussions until you structure?
Yeah, we'll talk about that from a committee
Till you
level.
structure it
Yeah.
better?
Yeah.
Because I do have some questions about, you have people, asking people to come in, stakeholders, and if they just don't show, then what?
Yeah.
that's something that has to be considered.
Yeah, if they don't show Ms. Anastasia, I think that tells a story in and of itself. We can't control what people do and who shows up and who
That's
doesn't show.
exactly right, but
So
we
that
do
show-
have to have a comeback for that somehow,
Yeah, the comeback is that they didn't show up. And so the comeback is that.
that the community knows they didn't show up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That they were invited, but they
Yeah.
didn't show. So just to be clear, so for the forum that really basically we're throwing kind of back to Councilman Garrett, since it was his in the first
Yep,
place.
absolutely.
And since we seem to have little control over the structure of it. So basically, I guess what we're agreeing as a board is that we show, but for the most part, it's going to be his
Yes,
to run. Okay, all right.
absolutely. And then we'll look to start planning some of our own
Okay.
throughout the course of the rest of this year.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Mr. Costa, sorry about that.
No worries, thank you, Chair. So I want to do two things real quickly. I want to give a summary of where our 2025 budget process is, and second, pathway towards the passage of the budget. So for the benefit of everybody's understanding, every department under the city of Akron has a budget respective with it. Those are the dollars that both fund the staff and the operations. And so the Police Oversight Board has a budget with it as well, too. For the summary in terms of where our 2025 budget is, I sent out a updated draft to all board members a little earlier today. That is a third iteration of back and forth between myself and Director Fennell with respect to the budget that we believe that'll be needed in order to accomplish our goals moving forward for the 2025 year. And so would ask that every board member kind of take a look at that and provide some feedback, some thoughts, or some perspective, ideally directly to Director Fennell, so we can be in compliance with Ohio's laws and we're not kind of having back and forth between multiple board members. I think that there is a strong argument that the board needs additional resources in light of patterns of use of force and deadly force. As we've lamented several times right now, the board's true ability, power really under the charter in its current form is really just to make recommendations to city council and the mayor. But if we've got additional tools and resources, I think this board would be in a better position to more precisely and accurately reflect and make recommendations that tell the story of the cost of policing as it's occurring right now. The cost both to life, but from an insurance and from a business standpoint as well too. And so, not to telegraph anything, but our budget forthcoming could be a little bit different than it may have been in the past. So, in moving forward in terms of passing our draft budget, the city is still figuring out exactly when they're going to be holding hearings. City council holds annual hearings for each department to come and to present their budget for consideration and for potential approval. That may be taking place, the date has not been confirmed yet, but may be taking place mid-February. And so working backwards, we would like to get a budget passed before the end of the month. And so what we will need to do then is we will need to have a budget approved by all of our board members, or at least a majority of them. So the thought is that, rather than, convening everybody with a special meeting just to pass the budget, we're all going to be together next Wednesday for the forum. And so my thought is that, it may make sense perhaps from 5 to 5:30 for us to gather specifically for the purpose of having, I guess, a special meeting to review our budget for the 2025 budget and to take a vote on it if board members are comfortable doing so. So that's a thought. Alternatively, we could look to a date that's after that if more time and discussion is needed. But again, the last thing I wanted to do was to ask board members to, come together again for a special meeting that really shouldn't take, much time if everyone is comfortable with the budget. And so that's a summary on where everything lies, and just kind of want to get a sense of folks' thoughts, feelings, perspectives, comments.
Skipping.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Costa, I, for one, would prefer to have a special meeting at a different date and here. For a number of reasons. I mean, I think just the logistically, trying to somehow convene at East Akron Neighborhood Community Center, as that larger forum is trying to convene, I think is not going to be easy. And also we would have inherently there'd be a time constraint because the forum's going to start. I just took a quick look. I had a little bit of, frankly, the budget number was presented by Councilman Garrett as part of the forum in a very positive way, I should say. But so I had some previous knowledge about it, and I have my instincts are to yes, but I think there's a lot to be talked about. I think we should just have a dedicated time that doesn't have an end time to do it. And it ought to be done in this room, with all public notice. And I would suggest the 29th to get it done, but I would really rather not do it the same night as the forum.
Other thoughts?
I don't have a problem with that. I would hope that we would be able to join the meeting remotely. If we can't make it down here. I mean, in other words, the way we do it now is that if you can't come in person, you can join via Teams.
Do we have a list of everything that the extra money is for? Is it in your report? I didn't see it.
So you should have received a copy of the draft budget.
Okay.
And within it, it's got line items specifically. And there's even comments in there reflecting, some of the increased costs. But I mean, all the line items are
Okay.
pretty explanatory to some degree. They kind of say what the cost is for incur.
No, I was just going to say, did you just send that? I didn't get it.
I did.
Okay.
I sent that
Okay.
literally earlier.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's what I was.
So, that would allow for some additional time for board members to digest and then for some conversations or some consideration from Director Fennell. I guess I'm also a fan of not putting a cap on the discussion as well, too. So if January 29th, I believe that's a Wednesday, works for other folks, then, my thought is, let's go for it. But I just wanted to be mindful of folks' time and schedules.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agreed that it's important enough to have a special meeting and where we can all sit and talk it through on the 29th. Works for me.
Yeah, I can do the 29th. I didn't have a problem with the 22nd. I think it's in our emails. I think we do the work and look at it, and whatever question we have, if we're prepared to come in, whether it's on the 22nd or 29th, we should be prepared to come in and ask those questions if we're all reviewing it. So I'm fine either way, but I didn't have a problem with the 22nd either. I thought it's something that we probably could have met about, coming in prepared, looking over it, and ask the question that we need to ask. But either way, I'm fine, whether it's 22nd or 29th. But I was okay, Mr. Costa, with the 22nd.
So what day?
It's sounding like everybody's better with the 29th. If I'm
22nd worked for me, too, so.
yeah. Ms. Castle, did you have any?
I'm indifferent. I kind of agree. I appreciate Mr. Costa sharing that with us today, so we have some time to digest it. So I would be comfortable moving forward with the 22nd, but I am happy to make myself available on the 29th as well.
Ms. Hawkins?
Either day is fine with me, too.
All right, so do we need to vote on the day? Or?
Where we
I think so.
meeting?
So the forum's over at East Akron Neighborhood Development Corporation. I've got a pretty good relationship with Cheryl Stevens, the executive director over there, so I could reach out to Cheryl to make sure that she's got the space to accommodate. They've got a fairly robust board themselves, and they regularly do have board meetings over there. So in terms of having space to accommodate, but Mr. Giffen, if your concern is more so on the record being able for us to, telecast record, et cetera,
Yes.
then I'm
Yes,
sensitive to
yes.
that
I mean,
as well.
I have to assume there's going to be no ability to have YouTube. I don't know how many people are watching us tonight, but I think it's going to be important. There are some. It's a good budget. Like I say, my sort of initial take on it is, is supportive, but it is substantially more than our current budget, and I think that the community would expect us to thoroughly review with Mr. Fennell, the changes that are being proposed, ask the hard questions, and be able to hear it. The budget is maybe the most serious thing we do. So I really think it needs to be in this room and in a way with all due formality and in a way which people can participate in our meetings just as they do now.
I agree with Mr. Gippen.
And I apologize, but I am not available on the 22nd.
All right, well, we'll move it to the 29th, Mr. Costa,
Thank you.
and have a special meeting on the 29th, right here in council chambers at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
6 o'clock is good for me. If you all, can you please take a look at it and send any thoughts, comments, questions directly to Anthony so we can start to kind of track those, have those discussions now. We'd really like to get the budget passed before the end of the month. The 29th puts us a little bit close, and I would like us to get it passed that evening if possible.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Mr. Costa and Ms. Fennell, for your work on the budget.
To the 22nd. I mean, were we gonna vote on the 22nd?
I don't think
Okay.
it's gonna be a voting thing. I think we are
got it.
gonna, thank you, Ms. Hawkins.
Yeah.
Now we'll move to Human Resources and Ms. Richards.
Thank you. The only thing on the radar is Mr. Fennell's one-year anniversary will be March 26th, I believe. And so I will begin the review process, announce that to you all what that will be so everybody has input into his evaluation. Stay tuned.
Do we have an evaluation form or
Working on it.
format?
I'm working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Richards and HR? All right. If not, I'll move into Chair's comments. First, as always, I want to thank this board and our auditor and his team for all the great and hard work they've been doing. It's been a challenging time, obviously, just even coming into the new year, the past couple of months. But I do appreciate the efforts and that we've been putting forth. Appreciate the prayers, the continued prayers for our city as well, because they are needed. Again, I'd like to just thank the community for coming out and for the words that were spoken. In no way, I do want to apologize on behalf of us. In no way was any laugh that was happening in regards to trying to deaden what has come out today. That wasn't the case. And so any offense that we have shown, I want to apologize to the family. That wasn't our heart or nor our posture of what we wanted to do. Also just want to say as well, we're coming up on not only on Mr. Fennell's one-year anniversary, but we are coming into some milestones as a board to where 3 of our board members who have started with us, their terms, if you will, are coming up. And I would just want to acknowledge some things. And I think, Ms. Jones, you said it really well earlier in your comments about the continuity that we've been able to have as a board. And we know our service on this board has lacked continuity, especially when we first started, but it seems like we have found our way over the past, I would say, months to a year. And so I just want to acknowledge my vice chair, Ms. Anaskevich, for her commitment and her service to this board. I think that the value that you have brought us has been phenomenal. And with that being said, understanding from a board function perspective, it doesn't mean that all of us are going to agree or see things the right way. And I think that's the goodness of the board. It's the challenge that we've had to walk through and suffer through collectively with one another. However, we have made a commitment to serve and to serve well. And so, Ms. Anaskevich, it's been great to have you here. And I want to ask you publicly, would you like to seek reappointment to continue to stay on this board?
Yes, I would. I think we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things going on. The public is dependent on us. And to some degree, we have, made do on some of our commitments, but we have a lot more commitments to go now. There are some things that have happened that we absolutely have to keep our eye on with respect to our community and the police department and how they're interacting with our community. So I feel that it's important to stay because I do know some things about how the system of the police department. I work there. And having been a federal investigator, I know how investigations are supposed to go. And I am determined to see this city get back on track with respect to how our police department is treating our citizens. So I don't think this is a time. I could get frustrated and say I'm leaving, but I'm not going to leave right now. I'm not going to leave because I think all of us need to, put the pedal to the metal with what's going on in our city.
Thank you, Ms. Anaskevich. I know from my perspective, I would be honored to have you to continue to serve on this board. I think it brings the stability that we need here with all of us continue to remain, especially those who have started from the very beginning. I feel like we're all getting our footing. Mr. Gippen, again, just, man, when I think about where we have grown and evolved from a standpoint of governance, I know that committee, yourself, Mr. Casa, and also Ms. Castle, with a lot of putting together of documents and all those things. It has been a great support to our board for the past 2 years. And so I want to ask you publicly as well, would you like to continue to serve this board and have reappointment to this board?
Very much so, Mr. Chairman. And I maybe to add my own perspective on it, when I first met with the council, well, it was Council Mayor's office, the screening committee that we all spoke with initially, I actually had noted that there was actually a bit of it was really an error in the way the ordinance was written, so that the three of us actually would have been limited just to the 2-year term and could not have served further. And I noted that to the committee, and I pointed, and what I said was that basically it would take probably 2 years just to get the board and hopefully auditor, functioning as they should. And that's proved to be the case. It's taken us pretty much these 2 years, although I think it's frankly gone better than I thought it would. But I told them that I would like to serve the 6 years. In other words, an additional 4-year term at that time. Just as Mrs. Anaskevich, I strongly would appreciate the opportunity if council will give it to me to finish the 6 years that I had contemplated.
Thank you, Mr. Giffen. And I think that you're a value add to our board, and man, your service goes without saying. So thank you so much. Ms. Jones, I know you have stepped in and came in and been with us, and I know relationally we go back a long way. However, I think the spirit that you bring to our board has been one that has been needed, especially the relational aspect of what it is, because that's our work and that's what we need to do. And so I could go on and on. But I know I speak for myself, but also our board. Man, I would love if you would be willing to seek reappointment. And is that something that you are desiring?
Well, when the mayor called me up, I guess around May, and asked me if I would be interested in being appointed to the board, and I told him initially no, just because I wasn't sure exactly what my life was going to look like in retirement and what value I could add. And then I changed my mind and said yeah. And since then, unfortunately, some family matters have taken a lot more time and attention and emotional as well as physical attention. And as most of you know, and if any of you know me, when I lean in, I lean all the way in, because I really, really want to do the very best that I can do and don't want to just be keeping a seat warm because somebody else could be doing this. And so at this point, if I had to answer right now, I would say that I probably won't be able to continue. Certainly, I know I won't be able to do another 4 years. My husband has a sort of a progressive disease, and it's probably just going to get worse rather than better. So, and it's going to take more time as I go forward. And so, and I don't want to make a commitment that I know I cannot keep, or make a commitment that I would only be doing half of what I know I should be doing in order to serve well. So, so that's where I am right now, is that I would have to say no. When do you have to know for sure?
I think the terms go up the end of next month, which is February.
Oh, okay, wow,
Yeah,
soon.
so if you want to
Okay.
talk sometime in February, we can. But I
Okay.
appreciate your sentiment, your comments, and know that we'll continue to pray for you as well as your husband and
Thank
your
you.
family, for
Thank
sure.
you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. Anything else good for the order? If not, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm sorry.
I wanted to say something in relation to a comment that was made by one of the citizens. I believe Jasmine's family is here. And I just want to tell you on behalf of myself and this board, you have our deepest condolences. And whatever we can do, or whatever we're able to do as a board regarding our restrictions or lack thereof, we're going to do to make sure that your family gets the justice and the attention that you deserve. Okay, I just wanted to say that.
All right. Well, have a good evening, everybody. We are adjourned. And God bless. Safe travel.